The term vegetarian, as applied to those who abstain from all flesh food, but not necessarily from such animal products as eggs, milk, and cheese, appears to have come into existence over 50 years ago, at the time of the founding of the Vegetarian Society in 1847. Until that date, no special name had been appropriated for the reformed diet system, which was usually known as the Pythagorean or vegetable diet, as may be seen by a reference to the writings of that period. Presumably, it was felt that when the movement grew in volume, and was about to enter on a new phase, with an organized propaganda, it was advisable to coin for it an original and distinctive title. Whether from this point of view the name vegetarian was wisely or unwisely chosen is a question on which there has been some difference of opinion among food reformers themselves, and it is possible that adverse criticism would have been still more strongly expressed but for the fact that no better title has been forthcoming. On the whole, the name vegetarian seems to be fairly serviceable, its disadvantage being that it gives occasion for sophistry on the part of captious opponents. In all controversies, such as that of which vegetarianism is the subject, there are verbalists who cannot see beyond the outer shell of a word to the thing which the word signifies, and who delight to chop logic and raise small obstacles, as thus. Verbalist. Why vegetarian? Vegetarian. Why not vegetarian? Verbalist. How can it be consistent with vegetarianism to consume, as you admit you do, milk, butter, cheese, and eggs, all of which are choice foods from the animal kingdom? Vegetarian. That entirely depends on what is meant by vegetarianism. Verbalist. Well, surely its meaning is obvious, a diet of vegetables only, with no particle of animal substance. Vegetarian. As a matter of fact, such is not and has never been its accepted meaning. The question was often debated in the early years of the Vegetarian Society, and it was always held that the use of eggs and milk was not prohibited. To induce habits of abstinence from the flesh of animals, fish, flesh, fowl, as food, was the avowed aim of vegetarianism, as officially stated on the title page of its journal. Verbalist. But the word vegetarian, what other meaning can it have than that which I have attributed to it? Vegetarian. Presumably those who invented the word were the best judges of its meaning, and what they meant by it is proved beyond a doubt by the usage of the society. Verbalist. But had they a right thus to twist the word from its natural derivation? Vegetarian. If you appeal to etymology, that raises another question altogether, and here too you will find the authorities against you. No one has a better right to speak on this matter than Professor J.E.B. Mayer, the great Latin scholar, and he states that, looking at the word etymologically, vegetarian cannot mean an eater of vegetables. It is derived from vegetus, vigorous, and means, strictly interpreted, one who aims at vigor. Mind, I am not saying that the originators of the term vegetarian had this meaning in view, but merely that the etymological sense of the word does not favor your contention any more than the historical. Verbalist. Well, what does vegetarian mean then? How do you explain it yourself? Vegetarian. A vegetarian is one who abstains from eating the flesh of animals, and whose food is mainly derived from the vegetable kingdom. The above dialogue will show the absurdity and injustice of charging vegetarians, as the late Sir Henry Thompson did, with equivocal terms, evasion, in short, untruthfulness, because they retain a title which was originally invented for their case. The statement that vegetarians have changed the meaning of their name, owing to inability to find adequate nourishment on purely vegetable diet, is founded on similar ignorance of the facts. Here are two specimens of Sir Henry Thompson's inaccuracy. In 1885 he wrote, "It is high time that we should be spared the obscure language, or rather the inaccurate statement, to which milk and egg consumers are committed, in assuming a title which has, for centuries, belonged to that not inconsiderable body of persons whose habits of life confer the right to use it." Observe that Sir Henry Thompson was then under the impression that the name vegetarian, invented in 1847, was centuries old. Nor, names apart, was he any more accurate as regards the practice itself, for it can be proved on the authority of a long succession of writers, from the time of Ovid to the time of Shelley, that the use of milk and its products has been from the first regarded as compatible with the Pythagorean or vegetable diet. The fact that some individual abstainers from flesh have also abstained from all animal substances is no justification of the attempt to impose such stricter abstinence on all vegetarians on peril of being deprived of their name. 13 years later, Sir Henry Thompson's argument was entirely changed. His assertion of the antiquity of the name vegetarian was quietly dropped. In fact, its novelty was now rather insisted on. They, the vegetarians, emphatically state that they no longer rely for their diet on the produce of the vegetable kingdom, differing from those who originally adopted the name at a date by no means remote. But our critic was again absolutely mistaken. There is no difference whatever between the diet of those who adopted the name at the date by no means remote and that of those who bear it now. Now, as then, there are some few vegetarians who abjure all that is of the animal, but the rule of the society, now, as then, is that the use of eggs and milk is permissible. At the third annual meeting, held in 1850, it was stated by one of the speakers that the limits within which the dietary of the Vegetarian Society was restricted excluding nothing but the flesh and blood of animals. To avoid any possible misunderstanding, let me repeat that it is no part of the case for vegetarianism to defend the name vegetarian in itself. It may be a good name or a bad one. What we defend is our right to the title and indefeasible historical claim, which is not to be upset by any such unfounded and self-contradictory assertions as those quoted. But it may be said that even if the title is historically genuine, it would be better to change it, as it evidently leads to misunderstanding. We should be perfectly willing to do this, but for two difficulties. First, that no other satisfactory title has ever been suggested, and secondly, that as the word vegetarian has now a recognized place in the language, it would scarcely be possible to get rid of it. At any rate, the substitute, to have the least chance of success, would have to be very terse, popular, and expressive. Take, for example, the name flesh abstainer or acreophagist, proposed by Sir Henry Thompson. The obvious objection to such terms is that they are merely negative and give the notion that we are abstinents and nothing more. We do not at all object to the use of the term flesh abstainer as explanatory of vegetarian, but we do object to it as a substitute, for as such it would give undue prominence to our disuse of flesh food, which, after all, is merely one particular result of a general habit of mind. Let us state it in this way. Our view of life is such that flesh eating is abhorrent and impossible to us, but the mere fact that this abstinence attracts the special attention of flesh eaters and becomes the immediate subject of controversy does not make it the sum and substance of our creed. We hold that in a rational and humanized society there could be no question at all about such a practice as flesh eating. The very idea of it would be insufferable. Therefore, we object to be labeled with a negative term which only marks our divergence from other persons' diet. We prefer something that is positive and indicative of our own. And until we find some more appropriate title, we intend to make the best of what we have got. The whole "why vegetarian" argument is, in fact, a disingenuous one. The practical issue between vegetarians and flesh eaters has always been perfectly clear to those who wished to understand it, and the attempt made by the verbalists to distract attention from the thing in order to fasten it on the name is nothing but sophistical.